She is why you can't hike alone at Icewater Spring anymore. And after what you're about to hear, you'll understand why the Appalachian Mountains have a rule that nobody officially made. In mid-May of 2016, deep in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, a 26-year-old woman named Mackenzie Aldridge set out alone for what was supposed to be a 3-day solo hike. Her first, her proof. Everything was fine until her second evening on the trail, when a woman appeared from the tree line and offered to help her to a campsite half a mile off the path, somewhere no trail marker had ever pointed. By the following morning, Mac was found 2 miles from any marked route, her ribs opened near the liver with a precision wound that no thorn, no branch, and no wilderness accident could explain. The ranger who found her spent the next 3 years pulling cold case files, and what he found in those archives had been quietly removed by the time he went back for them. Only one person made it out of that forest with the full account. Her name is Mackenzie Aldridge, and this happened to her in May of 2016, in the mountains she thought she knew. Saturday morning, May 14th. Mac Aldridge pulled into the Icewater Springs trailhead in a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard and a half-eaten granola bar on the passenger seat. She was 26, unemployed for 3 months, living in her parents' house in Knoxville, sleeping in her childhood bedroom, eating dinner at 6 p.m., trying not to notice the way her mother looked at her across the table. This trip was not a vacation. It was a test she designed for herself. Her pack weighed 34 pounds. She knew because she'd stepped on the bathroom scale 3 times. New Merrill boots, worn twice around the block. A laminated trail map from the Knoxville Library, covered in highlighter. She had never done this before. The ranger at the check-in desk was older, reading glasses, coffee going cold. He looked at her pack, her boots, her highlighted map. Then he said the kind of thing people say without really meaning to say it. "Trail's quiet this time of year. Watch yourself out there. Never trust a stranger in these hills." Mac laughed. "The way you laugh when you're nervous and want to seem like you aren't." She pocketed the map and headed for the trailhead. The Smokies in mid-May are loud. Warblers in the canopy, hardwood creaking in the breeze, boots crunching wet gravel. But 40 minutes into old-growth forest, Mac noticed something missing from all that noise. No woodpeckers. The trees here were full of hollows, full of dead wood, the exact habitat. The silence where that drumming should have been sat in the air like a held breath, and she filed it away without knowing why. At 3:30 p.m. she reached the shelter, signed the trail register, and flipped back through the previous pages. Mostly couples and small groups over the past 2 weeks. The last solo entry was April 28th. A woman. First name only, D. Hargrove. Under notes, 4 words in small, careful print. "Don't camp here alone." The entry directly beneath it, different handwriting dated 3 days later, said only, "She's right." Mac studied the page for a long moment, then she closed the register, adjusted her pack straps, and kept moving. She didn't notice the 6 cairns along the left shoulder of the trail until she was already past them, each one topped with a flat stone, placed like a closed eye. They weren't on her map. By 5 p.m., Mac's new boots had eaten her feet alive. She found a moss-covered bank 20 feet off the trail, dropped her pack against a tulip poplar, and dug through the top pouch for medical tape. The forest here was older, taller canopy, less undergrowth, the light coming down in long amber columns that were already going orange at the edges. She unwrapped her left heel first. The blister had opened inside the boot and dried. She worked the tape slow and methodical, the way her mother had taught her to do bandages, and tried not to think about how much trail was still ahead of her. That's when the smell hit her. Faint, low, almost sweet in the wrong way, like iron left sitting in standing water. She lifted her head and pulled a slow breath through her nose and couldn't place it. Old pennies held in a closed fist. She looked around the bank. Nothing moved. The amber light held steady between the trunks and the forest floor was quiet, and she told herself it was probably a deer. Something dead further in, the wind carrying it over. She finished the tape job and that was that. Except the smell didn't go anywhere. 5 feet from where she was sitting, half buried in the leaf litter, was a hiking boot. One boot. Women's Vask Summit, full-grain leather, the kind that runs $200. The sole was torn clean at the ball of the foot. Not worn through. Torn, like something grabbed the bottom and pulled hard. Mac picked it up and turned it over. The leather exterior was intact. No mildew, no rot, no darkening from moisture. It had been somewhere dry. She folded back the tongue, and there it was, written in black permanent marker, block letters that hadn't faded. Sarah. April 2014. 2 years ago. The boot was clean. Mac set it down and looked at the forest floor around it. The leaf litter here had been disturbed, not by wind, but pressed flat in a wide path running parallel to the trail before curving away into the deeper trees. No tracks, no footprints, just pressure, like something had moved through low and deliberate, dragging weight. She stood up, adjusted her pack. A hiker lost gear. It happened. Gear got cached and forgotten. That was a reasonable thing to think. She thought it. The smell followed her back to the trail. 30 minutes later, crossing a creek on a split-log bridge, Mac grabbed a birch tree for balance. Her hand landed 2 inches below a dried smear at eye level. She pulled back, looked at it straight. A handprint. Dark brown, nearly black at the center. 4 distinct finger pads pressed flat against the bark and left there. The edges were still defined enough that the rain hadn't reached it. The canopy overhead was too dense. Recent enough that the bark hadn't fully absorbed it. She looked down. No blood on the ground, no drag marks, no disturbed earth on either side of the bridge. The handprint was alone on the tree, at exactly her eye level, 5 feet 4 inches, like whoever left it had been standing directly in front of it. Not catching a fall, not reaching for balance, standing still and pressing, deliberately. The smell was stronger here. That low copper sweetness, close now, warmer than it had been on the bank. It had been in the air for the last half-mile, and she'd only just matched it to something real. Mac pulled out her phone, opened the photo she'd taken of the trail register page back at the shelter, zoomed in on D. Hargrove's entry. She'd read it twice already, but something pulled her back to it now, standing on that bridge with her hand still hovering near the bark. At the very bottom of the notes field, below "Don't camp here alone," was a mark she hadn't noticed before. Small, pressed into the paper with a fingernail or a pen tip. Not writing. A single tally mark. 1 vertical line. Mac pocketed her phone. In the leaf litter beside the log bridge, half submerged in the mud at the water's edge, was a chestnut. Out of season by 6 months. Intact, not rotted, not eaten by anything. She almost stepped on it. She didn't think about it, and she kept moving. By 7 p.m. the light was gone from the trail in everything but name. Mac came down a rocky pitch on loose scree, and her right ankle rolled hard to the outside. The pack drove her forward, and her palms hit granite, and she stayed there on one knee for a long moment, breathing through her nose, waiting to find out how bad it was. The answer came back slow and cold, a deep, bone-level ache, the nauseating kind that lives below the skin and doesn't respond to walking it off. Not a roll, something structural. She sat back and did the math. 2 miles to her planned campsite, battery at 31%, no signal since the first ridge. The shadows between the trees were already solid black, and sunset had been 20 minutes ago. Her headlamp was clipped to the outside of her pack, and she reached for it now, hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline she hadn't finished processing. She had 2 options. Push 2 miles in the dark on a bad ankle, alone on a trail she didn't know well enough to walk in daylight. Or shelter here on the scree slope with no water source, no cover, and nothing between her and whatever the forest had been holding all day. She was still doing the math when Loretta appeared. She came from the uphill side, moving easily on a line through the trees that didn't look like a trail from where Mac was sitting. A woman in her mid-60s, weathered face, silver hair pulled back tight, waxed canvas jacket, gaiters, boots worn to the shape of her feet, a walking stick smooth from years of use. She moved through the failing light the way people move through their own living rooms, without checking her footing, without hesitation, without a headlamp. She looked at Mac the way the ranger that morning had looked at her pack and her highlighted map. "You're in rough shape," she said. Not a question. She got Mac upright with one practiced motion, the walking stick planted, her free arm solid under Mac's shoulder. "My campsite's closer than yours. Come on." Mac knew. Not in words, but the boot and the handprint were sitting in her chest like 2 stones, and some part of her brain was trying to say something that the rest of her wasn't ready to hear. She looked at Loretta's face. She looked at the dark trail. She looked at her ankle. She went. She told herself this was what being capable looked like, asking for help when you need it. Dr. Lenore had said something like that once. The bravest thing isn't always the independent thing. And Mac held on to that now the way she'd held onto the birch tree at the creek crossing. What she didn't hold on to was this. Her anxiety had been a low-grade hum since the parking lot that morning. Background noise she'd learned to work around, a frequency she'd lived with so long she barely clocked it anymore. But the moment Loretta's arm came under hers, it went quiet, completely, like a signal dropping out. Mac had never in her adult life felt her anxiety go quiet around a stranger. She noticed this and decided it meant she was getting better. Loretta led her off the marked trail onto a path that wasn't on Mac's highlighted map. A narrow track through older trees, the canopy closing overhead until the last gray light disappeared within 50 yards of leaving the trail. The temperature dropped. No blazes on the trees, no cairns, just Loretta moving through absolute dark without a light, her boots finding the path the way water finds a channel, certain and unhurried. Mac's headlamp threw a 10-foot circle, and past its edge, the forest was a wall. The trees here were older, genuinely old, trunks wider than Mac could reach around, bark furrowed deep. But they'd been marked, long vertical gouges at shoulder height, running in parallel pairs, 3 to 5 feet long. Not chainsaw. Not any tool Mac could name. Something that had dragged through the wood the way a finger drags through soft wax, unhurried, like it had all the time in the world. Mac's ankle throbbed in a cold, steady rhythm with every step. Loretta's arm under hers was solid and dry, and warm on the right side. On the left, the side of the walking stick, the air was noticeably colder. She didn't look at the stick. Then Loretta said, "I maintain these trails. Been doing it 40 years. I know every inch of this mountain." A pause. Just the sound of their boots on the unmapped path. "Most people don't end up out here by accident." Mac opened her mouth, closed it. Somewhere between the scree slope and wherever they were going, she realized Loretta had used her name. Not once, twice. And Mac hadn't introduced herself. She was certain of it. She turned the last hour over in her mind, checking every exchange, and the memory wasn't there. The dark between the trees pressed in around the headlamp's edge and gave nothing back. The campsite sat in a clearing that the forest had no business giving up, no undergrowth at the edges, no deadfall. Just a clean ring of old-growth trunks standing back from a fire pit like they'd been asked to make room. A 6-person tent, gear staged with military precision, split wood stacked in a neat cord. No dirt on the tent fly. Nothing personal anywhere. It looked less like a campsite and more like a room that had been prepared. Loretta got the fire going without ceremony. It caught fast, faster than wet May wood had any right to. Mac held her hands toward it and told herself the wrongness she was feeling was the ankle, the exhaustion, the battery blinking 19% in her pocket. Then the smell from the pot reached her. Rich and gamey, salt and rendered fat, and underneath it, that same low copper sweetness that had followed her since the moss bank. Warmer now, closer. Loretta handed her a metal mug. Eat. The broth was too good, the kind of good that bypasses thinking and goes somewhere older. Mac drank it faster than she meant to. Loretta sat across the fire and watched, not eating, not drinking, watching with a patience that had no bottom to it. Around the base of the stacked wood, half buried in ash, were chestnuts, a dozen of them, roasted black. Out of season by 6 months, the one by the log bridge, the smell since the moss bank, the path through the trees that wasn't on any map. The thought started and didn't finish because Mac's eyelids were already going heavy. Loretta stood. She rolled up her right sleeve. What Mac saw in the next 10 seconds is what she has never been able to stop seeing. The skin from wrist to fingertip had changed. Not injured, not deformed in any way the human body produces on its own. Stone gray, the color of old creek-bed calcite, pulled so tight over the bones beneath that every tendon and joint showed through the surface in sharp relief, like something that had been turning to rock from the inside out for a very long time. It caught the firelight and threw it back cold. Not the way living skin reflects warmth, but the way a wet stone does. Flat. Wrong. The fingers were too long, each one tapering past where fingers stop, the extra length ending in points that were not fingernails. Something harder, curved slightly inward, dark as obsidian. The kind of curve designed not for gripping but for going in. But the index finger was the thing Mac could not look away from. It didn't end. A spike extended from the tip, 8 inches of solid black, needle-fine at the point, fused at the base where rings of scar tissue had pulled and wrinkled tight around it. The body had tried to reject it for years and simply lost. It was the color of the cliffs above Alum Cave, perfectly straight. The most precise thing Mac had ever seen. Not monstrous the way something broken is monstrous, but monstrous the way something perfected over centuries for a single purpose is monstrous. The spike was wet. The firelight caught its surface and gave back a dark gleam. Through the stone-gray skin of Loretta's closed fist, a pulse moved. Rhythmic. Blue-white beneath the surface, traveling from wrist to spike tip and back like a current running a closed circuit. Then Loretta's mouth opened, and what came out was her mother's voice. Exact. The warmth, the timbre, the specific way her mother said her name on the phone at night. "Mac, honey, come here. I've been so worried about you." Dr. Lenore's voice fired once from somewhere very far back. The moment you start explaining away the thing that scared you is the moment you are in real trouble. The spike touched her ribs. Left side, below the breast. Ice cold. Not a strike. A placement. Controlled, deliberate. The way a surgeon sets the first instrument. Mac screamed from somewhere below her sternum and grabbed a burning branch from the fire and swung. Embers scattered across the tent fly. Loretta stepped back one step. One step was all she was going to get. She ran. No headlamp. Gone somewhere behind her. Ankle screaming. Branch burning down to her fist. The trees took her instantly. Absolute black in every direction. And behind her the footsteps came steady and unhurried. Not running. Not losing ground. Patient the way the mountain had been patient all day. The whole long patient silence of it. From the parking lot to the cairns to the boot, to the handprint to the chestnuts. All of it one long held breath. Finally letting go. The branch burned to nothing in her hand. The dark gave back nothing ahead. The footsteps held their pace behind her. She ran until she couldn't. Then she ran further. A ranger named Cole found Mac at 6:47 a.m., sitting against a tulip poplar 2 miles from any marked trail, knees drawn to her chest, boots gone, severely dehydrated. A 2-inch laceration below her left breast. Clean edges, no tearing, no debris in the wound. The ER doctor noted it twice in the chart margin, surgically precise. The surrounding tissue showed almost no bleeding. He asked about it twice, got no answer that satisfied him, and wrote unknown mechanism of injury and moved on. Mac told her story. The ranger station sent a team to the GPS coordinates she could approximate. They found nothing, no campsite, no fire ring, no boot prints off the marked trail. The official report read, "Solo hiker, exhausted and disoriented, self-inflicted laceration while fleeing through brush." Icewater Springs was flagged low priority. A ranger named Dale Pruitt read Mac's statement on a quiet Tuesday afternoon 2 weeks later. 14 years in the Smokies. The kind of careful that comes from losing things. Something in the precision of the wound description pulled at him, and he started with the cold case files. 7 missing persons over 40 years, all from the Icewater Springs corridor, all solo hikers, all spring or fall. But there was more. Between 2008 and 2012, 4 hikers were found dead in the surrounding wilderness. The autopsies described the same anomaly across all 4. Liver extraction, clean entry, no defensive wounds, no blood at the scene. The extraction geometry matched Mac's laceration exactly. Same depth, same angle, same absence of peripheral damage. 2 per year, 4 years running, all solo, all spring or autumn. The pattern stopped in 2012. Until Mac. Dale pulled the volunteer records and found a black and white photograph from 1987. A woman with a walking stick. Mid-60s, weathered face, silver hair. The nameplate read, Loretta Kess, Trail Steward, 1987 to present. Same face Mac had described. 30 years hadn't touched it. He cross-referenced her volunteer schedule against every disappearance date. Every single one aligned with periods when Loretta was listed as active on trail maintenance. He went to pull the 4 autopsy reports. They were gone. Not misfiled, physically removed. The folders were still there, the tabs still labeled, but the pages inside were absent. In the margins of the case file covers, in faint pencil, were tally marks. Groups of 5 crossed by a 6th. Dozens of them. More than the missing persons count. More than the bodies ever found. More than anyone had ever thought to look for. Dale photocopied the 1987 photograph and took it home that night. The next morning, the original was gone. The volunteer section covering 1985 to 1992 had been pulled from the archive entirely. The 2008 to 2012 case files had been sealed and transferred to an authority his supervisor could not name and would not look him in the eye while declining to name. "Drop it," his supervisor said. Dale kept the photocopy in his wallet. He revised the solo hiker protocols for the Icewater Springs corridor. The change went into effect quietly. No press release, no public notice, no explanation posted at the trailhead. Just a new rule on a laminated card behind the ranger station desk. Mac Aldridge drove back to Knoxville on a Sunday in a hospital gown pulled over her hiking pants, ribs taped, barefoot on the gas pedal. She turned the radio on and then turned it off. The road through the mountains was quiet. It used to make her anxious. Too much silence, too much open space. It didn't anymore. She drove with both hands on the wheel, and the window cracked an inch, and listened to the Smokies do what they had always done. Hold their silence like something that belonged to them. Like something that was never hers to hear in the first place. She didn't look back at the tree line. She already knew it was watching,